Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to week 28 of our weekly stitch along for 2024. Firstly, just to say I'm not doing a piece to camera. I haven't been very well. I've had some kind of coldy thing, I don't know what exactly. Anyway, I'm feeling better, but I'm not looking great and I'm not feeling like showing you my face. So apologies for that. So this week I've been thinking about doing some just simple stitching, and I was going to look at kantha, Indian inspired kantha, and I will come back to that. But then lovely Mary Ellen from the Red Parrot channel, hello Mary Ellen, and hello Gracie. If you watch Mary Ellen you'll hear all about Gracie, who gets the zoomies quite often. Anyway, she sent me a link via Instagram to a little video on YouTube about making a zokin, which is a Japanese cleaning cloth. And it sort of rang a bell somewhere in the depths of my mind because I'd seen it on Atsushi's channel. Atsushi, who we looked at his work when we looked at Japanese borrow a few weeks ago. So I thought, well, you know, I'm on the mend. Let's make a zokin. I don't know why those two things connected, you know, being ill and doing housework. But also in the Facebook group, there's been a lot of comments recently and here in the YouTube comments about people neglecting their housework because of their stitching. And I can so relate to that. Stitching's much more fun than housework, isn't it? So I thought, well, you know, maybe we can stitch ourselves a little cleaning cloth for our journals, and that might inspire us to go and make some actual zokin to be used. And then at least we can pretend we've done some housework. Does that make any sense at all? So I've got here, this is the last precious piece of my Auntie Lily's pillowcase, which you've seen me use here and there and refer to little scraps of it. It was white, I've dyed it with madder. Do you see it? But you see this is the most worn and fragile part of it. And it would have, if it, you know, hadn't come into my hands, somebody would have probably put it in a rag bag at best, or possibly even thrown it away. So for my zokin for my journal, I'm going to use the most fragile part of this. I'll probably cut off the edge bits that I can use, you know, in other projects. I mean, it's all worn everywhere, but it's so beautiful. And it was my Auntie Lily's. So this is what I'm going to use. So all you'll need is something. If you have a rag bag in the house, go and look in the rag bag. It could be preferably a cotton, old t-shirt or old tea towel, or you know, something like that. You also can make actual ones with old towels or flannels, you know, face cloths. But something soft and warm that you imagine would otherwise be thrown away or go into the rags, rather than a new piece of cloth. This cloth probably is at least 100 years old. That's a lovely thought. So here's an actual tea towel. This is a vintage French linen tea towel. It's actually not that worn. I was using it as a tea towel. These holes are not worn holes. These holes are Stella holes. So I'm not sure if I'll make, it has some stains on it as well. It is washed and clean, but you know. I'm not sure if I'll turn it into zokin cleaning cloths. I might do some visible mending at one point, and it's hanging around up here. I haven't got round to it because I thought I might do a little video about it. So anyway, naughty Stella. Naughty, naughty Stella. So all I've got is my bit of cloth. I've got some thread to stitch with. This is some vintage French darning cotton. Obviously you don't have to have that. Just, you know, anything, some kind of cotton thread that's nice to stitch with. A needle and my snippy fiskers. Thank you, Sue. And that's all. Pure and simple. So the first thing I'm going to do is I really don't want to lose even this. So I'm going to, basically you fold the cloth into however many layers it needs to create a usable little, you know, pad cloth to clean with. But we're doing this for the journal, so, or rather I am. So I want it to end up the right kind of size. I think I'm just going to go somewhere up here. I'm going to tear it very carefully, supporting it while I do so, because I don't want it to tear. It'll be inclined to tear where it's weaker. Yeah, I might have to cut it even. I think I'm going to just cut it, dear Henry. I don't really mind if it's not straight, because by the time I've folded it all up and save that bit. And just having a bit of an estimate how many times I think I can fold it and have it fit my project, my project, you know, my journal. So I'm having an experiment. That's 6 layers that would be. That feels quite thick. That's maybe a bit too much. So I'm going to cut it there as well, the other side of this really raggy bit. Save that bit. So, you know, whatever cloth you've got, have a little experiment with how many layers you think, because we still want it to be nice to stitch through. If you were making an actual cleaning cloth to use, then obviously you might have different criteria. You know, you want it to be sturdy. I wouldn't use this as a cleaning cloth because it's precious. I want to use it in my journal. It tears much better that way, so that's probably the weft. There we go, save that bit. So I'm left with this bit, which is the raggiest bit. So now I want to fold it. I think I'm going to fold that into the middle, like that, and then that like that. I'm really not firing on all cylinders, as they say. Fold that like that, and that like that. And if I do that, and traditionally when you make one, you'd make it so that you could turn it inside out, so that you didn't have raw edges on the outside. So that's not going to work if I do that, is it? Oh dear. Excuse me while my brain doesn't work. Maybe I'm just not going to worry about raw edges. I don't know. Oh dear. Dear, dear, dear. You're probably all shouting at me, trying to be helpful as to how I can do this. My problem is that raggedy bit's right on the edge. So I'm going to take that raggedy bit off, I think. Poor little cloth. Don't worry, it's going to be used, but I'm going to just do it differently. So I'm going to save that to one side for a minute. And now I'm going to fold this into 3, like that. And now I'm going to stitch it, come away, off. I'm going to stitch it now around 3 sides, and then I can turn it inside out and ease this bit down inside it. That's my plan. We'll see if it works. If you don't have such a, you know, raggedy piece of cloth, then it will be more simple. So I folded it into 3, but obviously yours will depend on the size and the shape of your cloth, because mine's very long and thin. If your piece was more square, you could fold it in half and half again or whatever. So I'm just going to fold it into 3 like that. So it'll make a, you know, we're making something that would actually be used to clean floors or something like that. I'm overthinking, A, because my brain's not working, like I said, and B, because it's for my journal. And probably C, because it's my Auntie Lily's precious pillowcase. This vintage darning cotton is 4 strands, so I'm going to take 2 strands. If you go and watch Atsushi, and I'll put a link to him making a Zokin, much more expertly than I'm doing, he'll talk about sashiko thread about using sashiko, proper sashiko thread. But I think, you know, if you've got it, then okay, you can use it, but I wouldn't go buying new sashiko thread. And I'm sure he would agree, just to make a cloth for cleaning the floors. In Japanese culture, they have fukin, which are cleaning cloths for dishes and, you know, kitchen surfaces and so on. And then when those start to wear out, then they would be repurposed into zokin, which are for cleaning floors. So the cloth kind of goes through a reverse hierarchy, if you like, of you know, what it's used to clean, from the cleanest to the dirtiest. So I'm just going to come in about ½ an inch or something. And Atsushi, of course, does sashiko ushin stitching, you know, with the needle rocking. I'm not good at that, so I'm going to do 2 stitches at a time. In sashiko, when you gather stitches onto your needle and the cloth puckers like that, you then just pull the cloth flat. If you remember back to the week when we looked at borrow, you'll remember that sashiko means little stabs and just refers to the stitching. The patterns and designs that are associated with sashiko are, you know, that's not all that sashiko is. Excuse me. I try to keep the throat clearing to a minimum. At least my head stopped hurting. I've had a pounding headache for 3 days. Luckily there's been Wimbledon on, so I've been able to just laze on the sofa and work on something for the coming Wonky Wednesday video, which I will show you. So now I'm here, I'm going to turn and go this way. I'll show you in a bit. And go up this side. Oops. And just enjoy stitching this lovely old soft cloth. I do use, I mean, I have cut up, I'm sure many of you do, you know, if tea towels or hand towels get old and worn, I cut them up to make rags, cleaning cloths. But I, in general, have just cut them into squares or rectangles and then hemmed them maybe, or blanket stitched them. But I've never done this sort of layering of a cloth before. I've also crocheted little cotton pads, you know, my daughter uses stuff to wash her face, you know, teenage girls, and the problems they get with their skin. Well, she's not a teenager anymore, but no, she's still a teenager till September. So anyway, now I've got 3 layers and I need to turn it, so I'm going to have a look. Now this layer is more sturdy than this layer. So I'm going to turn this as a single layer and that as a double. Not that it matters, because they'll all go back together as a 3. You could clip the corners if you wanted to. Perhaps I will a bit. Put those in the scraps. I know they're tiny, but they're precious. So I'm going to turn it. Being very careful, because I can poke a hole in it with my finger if I'm not careful. I'm not even going to, you know, normally you get a pokey tool, a skewer or a chopstick or something to poke out the corners. I'm not even going to risk that. And you see there, because I had 3 layers, I've now got a raw edge on the outside. Of course I have. That was going to happen. Oh well, never mind, we'll go with it. Doesn't matter. Get my thread out. There we go. So thank you, Marianne, for the idea and for thinking of me. So now I've got this little scrap and I thought I would basically just use it as stuffing. So I might cut it, because then, you know, so as not to waste it. And don't dare cut that, because that's held together with that. I'm just going to ease it inside between the 2 inside layers. Oh dear. Was it a lady said in the comments? I said, I'm so happy to be in a community where that sentence is normal. I can't remember the exact words, but it was something like, I've just waxed a leaf and stitched it to a tea bag. You know, sentences you don't hear in the so-called normal world. I just love it. Well, excuse me while I fiddle about. If it ends up lumpy and bumpy, then it ends up lumpy and bumpy. This was probably not the easiest way to do this, but I shall persevere. Oh, isn't it awful when you're not, when you don't work, when your hands and your body don't work? I mean, we all have that as we get older anyway. It sometimes can be really frustrating. Go in. And I don't dare, I'm going to do it very gently. I'm going to say I don't dare poke it in with something. It really doesn't want to go in. Do you know what? I'm going to put that piece there because I will use it in something else. I know I will. I'm just going to have a feel. It's more important that it feels nice and it looks nice because you won't be able to see it. Can I just turn that in? No, that's not going to work as an idea. Okay, I'm not going to use that in there. I will use that in something else. That, for example, will couch onto something if it's twisted. It'll couch onto something, so I shall save that. I don't have the energy to fiddle with it at the moment. So I'm just going to turn that in, that raw edge. You could, of course, just leave it raw edge. You could just build up some layers. If you had more than one little scrap of cloth, you could just layer them together. And there I see enormously the link with kantha. You know, where saris are layered together and stitched to form a new cloth, a new usable cloth. And the whole principle in all of these things is that the stitching is strengthening. And I guess that's really the theme of the week, that the stitching is strengthening. And I know it's something I've talked about before. I mean, in Borrow especially, we talked about it. But stitching is structural, you know, we use it to join two pieces of cloth together. In whatever way. It can be decorative. Oh, that'll do, pig. Go in. Apparently that won't do, I have to fiddle a bit more. Right, that'll definitely do. Pick my needle up. Yeah, that it can be functional, it can be structural, it can be decorative, but it can also be used when applied to the surface of cloths. It's both decorative and functional. I guess that's also like traditional quilting, you know, to hold the layers together. Because if you leave a big expanse of layers of cloth unstitched, then they'll rub against each other and shift and actually wear each other out. Okay, this poor little thing. I don't know why I feel sorry for it. I know some of you felt sorry for the leaves as you stitched them, and I'll talk about that a bit more. Right, all I'm going to do is just sew this fold closed. This is probably the worst job I've ever done on stitching something, but anyway. I'm just going to sew the fold closed, and then I'm going to continue around the whole edge. See, I'm doing a kind of very pale imitation of proper sashiko. Because I've got my short little tulip needle, and I'm not wearing a sashiko thimble. If you haven't seen sashiko stitching, or you don't remember from when I sent you to Atsushi in Japanese Borrow Week, do go and have a look at Atsushi doing it. Right, there's that little raw edge, because apparently I'm not spatially aware. I could, of course, have turned that under before I folded so that there wasn't a raw edge on the side. I think if you've got enough stitching, even if you're going to use a cloth to clean the floor or whatever, raw edge would not be a problem. But what I have seen, certainly the zukin that Atsushi made, was that he didn't have raw edges. Because you are going to, you know, well, not this one obviously, but proper ones for using, will take some wear. And this is would be the last chance, you know, this is the last life, the last incarnation for this rag, the zukin. It's, you know, it's the last thing it does before being thrown away. Advantage, of course, if it's all cotton, is that it will biodegrade, and you could even put it in the compost if it wasn't synthetically dyed, and the thread wasn't synthetically dyed. And many of you who did the book bundle project will have seen how quickly, in certain environments, cotton does biodegrade. Right, there's a little rip there in the cloth, but I'm just stitching on. You can see my stitching on the corner there. If you want to make real ones to use, Zokin, you can do this, the first part, you know, sewing around the edge on a sewing machine, but it is recommended that the surface stitching you do by hand. So you could do, you know, the construction, you could sit and make a pile of them if you had some rags. You could sit and make a pile of them on the sewing machine, and then just go and sit and do the top stitching, you know, this stitching by hand, because sewing machine stitching will make them stiffer. But it's a lovely little mindful project then if you've just got a little stack of them. And I know many of you have commented about, I'm just doing one back stitch and hiding my tail because I didn't leave enough of a tail, and then I've got two tails and I'm just going to cut them. Because that's how I feel. So it's not remotely square, but actually now that I've done that, even though it was a real rubbish job, it's not bad. So that's not it, of course, so no. I'm going to do another bit of surface stitching on it, and what I've seen, you could just keep going round and round, or you could do parallel lines, or you could, you know, if it was a one to be used, you need to put 2 or 3 lines of stitching through so that it doesn't shift about inside, just to sturdy it up. Sorry. I am going to do what I've seen traditionally done, which are diagonal lines. Now you can, of course, get a pencil or a blue pen or a friction pen or something like that and draw yourself lines, especially if it's a bigger piece. I'm just going to eyeball. I'm going to go into the seam with my knot. Hopefully. There we go. I'm going to, I think it's because the cloth's so fine. I'm going to have another go. Just pulled right through the thread, sturdier than the cloth. Just going to leave it like that and cut the tail off. So I'm just going to stitch on the diagonal by eye to the opposite corner. And my poor imitation of Sashko. Old t-shirts are great for making these as well. Because often we can't use, or we don't use, or I don't use cotton jersey very much in my Slowstitch. Just the nature of it, I don't find it that pleasant to work with. You know, it's a good way to use up old t-shirts if you don't like that either. Or if, you know, you have people, teenagers or men or whatever, that are working outside that wear through t-shirts like there's no tomorrow. I'm going I want to do a diagonal the other way, but rather than break my thread, I'm going to just stitch another line across there to get myself to that other corner. Yeah, because I recently made some t-shirt string out of an old t-shirt of Joey's, and there's a video. I made a video because a few people had asked in the cloth twine when we were doing cloth twining. Well, you know, people still are doing cloth twining. You know what I mean. Oh, apologies. Come on, brain, work. About using t-shirt twine. I'm sorry if my head's coming in. To make cloth twine and make cloth twine vessels and baskets and so on. So in response to that, I had this t-shirt. I think I also talked about it when I did the video about chopping up clothes to use for your slow stitch. Because I think I was going to do it as part of that video, but when I opened it out to do, although my son had assured me that it was clean, there was soup or something spilled down the front of it. So it had to be laundered. But anyway, I have now made the video of t-shirt string, finally. I do get around to these things eventually. And I think I will upload it this Friday. So if you've been waiting to see that, that'll be coming on Friday. And the pieces of that t-shirt that I didn't use for the twine would be ideal for making these little cleaning pads. Right, so now I've done a cross. Now I think I want to do another shape. I mean, that would fall apart if I tried to clean with it, and I know I'm not going to. So I'm going to come down halfway this side and do like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. I'm just eyeballing halfway. If I really wanted it to be exact half, I could fold. Maybe I will. There's half. One more stitch. So now, there's where my stitch needs to be, and I'm going to stitch across there. So I'm going to find that half, which is just there. And you can use a similar principle to well, it's the same principle as the cutting. I can't remember when I talked about cutting. I think, have I done that already, or is it in the t-shirt video that you haven't seen yet, the t-shirt string? The tailor's trick, you know, I have talked about it, of looking where you're cutting to, if you're cutting a long line. It's the same with stitching, if you look where you're stitching to. So I want to go to there. I'm flicking my eyes backwards and forwards like a snooker player lining up a pot. If you watch snooker, you'll know what I mean. You know, you flick your eyes from where your needle is to where your needle's going, and hopefully you end up there somewhere in the region of. I want to go to halfway here. Of course, if you much prefer to draw lines and all that, you go for it. I think my thread's not going to make it to the end. I hope it does. Just about. There we go. I need new thread. I'm just going to bury it in there somewhere. Yeah, I was saying some people reported that they totally unexpectedly, when they started stitching leaves, felt as if they were doing a damage, you know, not a damage. I think the analogy that someone used that resonated most with me was like, you know, before people knew any better. Hopefully they still don't do it anymore. When they pinned butterflies onto cards. You know those things you see when they saw the leaf stitched onto the paper or the cloth. They had the same feeling as when you see a butterfly pinned onto a card. And I don't feel that myself, because I feel that I'm preserving and honouring the leaf by stitching it, but I can imagine that feeling. And then those people were happier with trapping the leaf behind something. Again, you could say you're imprisoning it, but I just think it's so interesting, and I'm so grateful to all of you who share the feelings that you have, because that is the very essence of slow stitch, being aware of what you're doing. Looking how wonky that is. Never mind. And being aware. And now my thread, what's happened? Why have I only got one length of thread? Something wrong with that piece. Did I not get two? Oh, it broke. Well, that's vintage thread for you. So I'll do this to make sure it's sturdy enough to stitch with. Yeah, you know, paying attention not only to the work and responding to the cloth or the paper or the leaf or whatever, which I talked about, but also to your own emotions when you're working with something. And that can be an emotional connection to the piece you're stitching, because the cloth has meaning for you, or, you know, or the action of what you're doing reminds you of somebody. You know, remember, maybe your grandmother taught you how to embroider or things like that. So when you're doing embroidery, you're taken back to when you first learned how to make a lazy daisy or a cross stitch or whatever's the case. And that might make you feel sad, it might make you feel happy, it might make you feel a mixture of those things. And for me, it's all these things that are important to be aware of. And even the upsetting, or it might make you feel angry, or, you know, all the associations that you might have. Okay, so now I'm back where I started, and I've done that little line to get myself there. So all I'm going to do now is just carry on along there to there, and then I'm going to have to break off and do that, I think. I'll see when I get there. I am quite enjoying stitching this, although I've done a very bad job technically. This pillowcase belonged to my Auntie Lily, who I loved, and she didn't do much well, no, that's not true. She did a lot of dressmaking in her younger days, but she stopped that when I was quite young because she had a stroke, and she couldn't use a sewing machine anymore. But she could still knit. Those of you who've watched my sock knitting know about my Auntie Lily knitting, which many of you also do, although my Auntie Lily didn't show you how to knit, but apparently she wasn't the only one that knitted like that. She also did a lot of crocheting, but I was never really attracted to crocheting. She made very fine lacy doilies and you know, table runners and tray cloths and things like that, and it never really, it wasn't really my style then. If she'd done hippie crochet, you know, like granny squares and ponchos and things, I'd have been all over it when I was a teenager, but I came to that much later. I only taught myself to crochet about 7 years ago. Right, so I'm there, and I want to stitch there just to finish that line. Do you know what, I'm going to just do a third line. And I'm liking the look of the dark blue on the terracotta colour. This cloth was dyed with madder roots that had already given their red, and then I probably got the dye bath a bit too hot which is why it then turned this lovely terracotta orange rather than a true madder red. Madder is a very complex dye plant. There are lots of chemicals in it that give different colours under different conditions. And it's really slow dyeing with madder because it takes... I'm still going to have to end off, aren't I? I just realised. It takes about 5 years from seed for the roots to be big enough to use. And it's the roots that you use. You probably would never get rid of it even if you tried. You can dig up plants and think you've got all the roots and it'll still come back. It's kind of semi-invasive. And then the roots have to be cleaned, dried, ground down as far as possible to, expose as much of the pigment as possible. And then the dye bath has to be carefully managed in terms of temperature and the pH of the water and so on. It's not buy a packet, throw it in, and you get red. It's very complex. Natural dyers call it mother madder, I think because of the colour red. Or queen madder. Okay, well, do you know what, I can leave it like that because now it's symmetrical and apparently I have a need for symmetry. So I've got 3 lines here and 2 lines here and 2 lines here. And that is the shortest video by a long way if I call that the end. So I don't feel like I should because I don't want to shortchange you, as they say. Although I'm sure you would all forgive me, considering that I'm not feeling very well. But still, what I am going to do, I think, is I could patch that tea towel, couldn't I, that's laying there? Because that's all in the same theme. So I'll save that piece for my journal, which I've now put where you can't see it. I'll stitch that in at the end. I'm going to do maybe not the whole, every hole that Naughty Stella's made, maybe just 1 or 2. I'll start with this big one. Apologies if it's glary, but it's very possible you're not even looking. I do need some different threads, I've got some there. And here I've got some blue bits left over from last Wonky Wednesday. I'll use that and that. Yeah, so I'm going to just do a sort of front and back patch around to sort of trap the hole between 2 layers. So I'll start with, well, front and back, it's a tea towel. It does have a front and back because the edge is turned. I'll start with, I'll pin this to here. Oh, come on, Catherine. Pull yourself together, woman. So, this is just a raggedy bit of old chambray shirt. And just make sure it's big enough to cover the hole, which it is. I'm going to get some applique pins. Oh, before I do this, I'll do a little teaser for Wednesday. Because last Wednesday we did the dot thing, the cheats, applique and trapunto, I called it. Trapunto, by the way, I implied in the video that it's only for stuffing applique. It's not. You could stitch a whole cloth and then stuff it from the back, make a little slit. Sorry, put your teeth in. Make a little slit and push extra stuffing in from the back. So for example, you could stitch a shape or a letter. It was often used for monograms. You could stitch an outline of a letter and then make little slits in the back and then push some stuffing in, which could just be loose stuffing with tweezers or whatever, and then you'd whip stitch the little holes closed. Anyway, I don't know why I told you that. Okay, so we did the dots with the fake trapunto and the, cheats applique. So I've made these little, now I'll show you this, I won't show you those, I won't show you what I've made. You have to watch on Wednesday to see those. Trailer. Cliffhanger, no. But I have made this, I did want to show you this. Hope you can see it, because I've got you right low in. Can you see? Can you see? Can you see? I'm showing you something, look up. So these were made with the Fred hair, of course. I'm doing them downstairs on the sofa. These were made with the applique. There's no trapunto in them though, they're just the applique on some of my eco dye. And I'd made four patches, and I did 2 with the applique and 2 I just did the stitching. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the bottom's just some eco print. And I've been admiring on Instagram Alexandra's work. Alexandra is a Portuguese artist who watches and follows along, and she's been particularly taken with Wonky Wednesday because she's not from a patchwork and quilting tradition, but she's really enjoying the way that you can do it wonky, you know. Really suits her style. Anyway, she's been, with her Wonky Wednesday squares, been making little boxes, little cloth boxes to store her threads and stuff in, and she showed a couple that were joined with crochet. And I'd looked at, it's called fusion quilting, it is a thing where you make fabric squares and join them with crochet. And I'd seen it, you know, going by here and there, and it interested me. But then I saw Alexandra's beautiful boxes, so anyway, I thought I'd have a go. So I made this box, and I joined it with crochet. So this coming Wonky Wednesday, I'm going to show you how I did this. Even if you don't crochet, it's simple. It's the simplest crochet stitch you could do that I used. So if you can get yourself a little crochet hook and some thicker cotton thread, you could have a go. You could also, and it's also in my brain to do this, transform this easily into, you know what, and I almost wished I had, but it would require unpicking, a rice bag. So anyway, so that's what's coming on Wonky Wednesday. So look out for that if you're interested. Okay, back to my tea towel. Sorry this is so bitty this week, you know, not the usual well-planned, structured. Who am I kidding? This week we're going to mess about with a bit of old pillowcase, talk about another video entirely, and mend a tea towel. Anyway. I do have a word of the week though, so, you know, that's something. Applique pinning my little scrap square to a rectangle thing to the tea towel. I'm going to get, that's just 2 strands of embroidery floss that happens to be in that needle. And I'm going to just make a start by stitching this round the edge, just with a running stitch. I'm leaving all those raggedy ends. I might trim them off afterwards. My bath towel that I use, or my shower towel, is mended like this. The same reason, Stella got it. And I like it because now I know it's mine, because we have several towels the same colour. Well, there's only me and Hans here now, nowadays mostly. I'm not really, you know, this is mine and that's yours kind of person. In Yorkshire they say, what's yours is mine and what's mine's my own. But, you know, I'm not like that really, but I don't know, that's my towel. It's got not anything to do with hygiene or, you know, no. I have even been known to dry myself on the dog's towel, well, my hands, you know. I don't know what it is. I just like, it's given it personality, and it's the memory of Stella, although she still makes holes in things. I was going to say it's a memory of when she was a puppy. I mean, she's coming up for 10, so she should now know better than making holes in things. I think she thinks she's being kind, making me things to mend. But I'd taken that towel to the local, there's a lake with a beach. And I'd gone there to let the children swim, and I'd taken my towel in case I had to swim or a paddle, and I'd taken this towel with holes in because I thought, well, I'll take it to the beach, it's got holes in, you know, doesn't matter. And I'd taken something with me to stitch on, I can't exactly remember what, but I'd finished it and the children wanted to stay and it was a lovely evening, you know, those times of day at the beach or the lake when most people have gone home and it's a lovely evening and you're still there and it's the light's lovely and, you know, it's just nice. So we stayed, basically. I think we went and got chips from the little caravan, but I had nothing left to stitch on. So I mended my towel. And I did it like this. Right, so that's stitched on that side. So when I now come through to the other side, well, there's that. So you could just do heavy, you know, kantha slash borrow stitching in both directions, but I like to cover the hole on the other side as well. I'm using fine cloths. Actually, that chambray was a bit thicker than it should have been, but it was laying there. So and I'm going to put this bit of blue on this side. Probably I'm going to make it a bit shorter. And obviously your stitching will show on both sides. You don't have to match them up. I could do that if I wanted to. Maybe I will, because that's big enough. Is that selvage there? No. The stitching's going to show, you know, on both sides and not necessarily on the cloth. I'll take a bit of that. It does not matter. And put some applique pins in that. So although I go, oh Stella, when I discover yet something else that's, if it's hanging on the hook, she can reach it, but she doesn't pull it down. You know, even if you go out and leave her alone or whatever, she doesn't do that. But if it falls on the floor, then she considers it fair game, and she goes and chomps on it. Isn't that funny how she thinks if it's on the floor it's hers, if it's hanging on a hook she's good and leaves it alone. Alright, I've got a little bit of that blue left, so I'm just going to, I could either come through if I wanted to be really particular, because I can feel that I'm between the chambray on the other side, or I could have just stitched my way there and not worried. And she's barking because I've just heard hands come in. It's still strange when there's only one bark. She stops a lot more quickly than... she barks less easily now that Cirrus isn't here. I think Cirrus was the main barker because he was in charge and, you know, he was guarding. But she sometimes doesn't bark at all if it's someone she knows. I don't know why she then barked her hands. She was asleep, maybe it made her jump because he banged the door downstairs. But when her whole life I thought she was quite a barker, but I now realise that mostly she was just following Sirius. Right, so that's finished. And I need some more thread. What's in here? It's a big messy bag. See, I still haven't sorted out my my old new DMC drawers with my threads. I will get myself organised one day. Is there something loose? My orts tin isn't here. I think it must be downstairs. Let's have some of that. Also blue. Otherwise I would use orts for this. And what you'll find, or certainly what I found with my bath towel, was when I washed it after I patched it, the patching went a lovely sort of puckery, you know, like old quilts go. It's got a lovely puckery quality to it. And when I hang it on the rack in the shower room, I always hang it in such a way so that the patch, I think there's 2 or 3 patches on it, so that as much of the patching shows as possible. Right, so I'm just going to go through the layers to hide my knot somewhat. And carry on around the edge. You could also just stitch up and down. I am going to do that as well. Normally I would probably stitch around the edge in a thread to match my tea towel or whatever it was I was patching. I do this on jeans as well, and you know, clothes. The same principle of a patch front and back. Sometimes I do just a front patch, depends on the hole, and also the cloth around it. The cloth around this hole is sturdy as anything, because the hole has been not man-made but dog-made. But if it's a worn hole, the cloth around the edge will be worn as well, even, you know, beyond the hole. So you really have to make sure that you go well into good cloth, good sturdy cloth. If you stitch into the worn cloth, then in no time at all that will rip as well. But this is perfectly sturdy here because little cockapoo teeth made the hole, not wear and tear of time. So then I would stitch around the edges with a thread to match the thing I was mending, just to get the patches applied. We're doing raw edge applique basically, and then I do up and down stitching over the top. So what I will now do, I've gone around the edge, so I've got this patch here and that patch there. Do you see there, the lines have come through there? I'm going to trim some of that hair off. I could pull some of it, but I don't want to pull it too far. It's been cut, so it's got lots of little ends rather than, you know, continuous threads running the whole length. I'm going to trim that knot tear, because if I not pull it out, because if I pull it out it'll be beyond the stitching. Yeah, if you tear, you know, you get the one long length, and then it does stop at one point. And if I was raw edge patching things, usually to be, that would have to be laundered, and I would try and tear cloth. And then if you stitch it enough, it won't, you know, it'll fray to a certain point and then it'll stop. So I have no worries at all about putting raw edge things through the wash. Right, so I think I'm going to just stitch up and down across this patch this way, you know, in one direction, and then I'm going to flip it over and stitch the other one in the other direction. And you feel the layers sturdying up as you stitch, and you can go off the edge of the patch if you want to. You know, you can see where the other patch is underneath by the outline. I just make a diagonal stitch, I don't mind about that. You know, that will show on the other side, you see there? You see the diagonal stitch? So then that initial outline stitch that you do around the edge of the patch, both front and back, serves two purposes. One, it gets the patch on and gets the pins out. And two, it shows you from the other side where the boundaries of that patch is. If you want to be more, you know, designy with your stitching. I had no intentions whatsoever of mending this tea towel. I was just going to show you it as an example of something that could be turned into a Zokin, but I'm glad I did, because it seemed, you know, it's all with the theme, isn't it, of we're doing housework without doing housework. I'm mending a tea towel. I'm a domestic goddess. I just never, ever, ever get over the joy of feeling and seeing the structure of the cloth change with the stitching. When I do want to revisit kantha, I used kantha as one of my in the week when we did textile cultures that had inspired us, diversity I think I called it. Kantha was one of mine, and you often see this kind of stitching referred to as kantha stitching. It's the stitching that's used in kantha, that's true, but it's also borrow stitching, it's quilting stitch, it's running stitch, isn't it, basically? I think people call it kantha stitch because the parallel lines and so on. Which is fine, as long as we all know what we're talking about. But there are two broad types of kantha. There's this kind of stitching, this is not kantha what I'm doing, but the layering of old saris or worn cloths together and then stitched with parallel lines of running stitch. Again, loading the needle. It's not exactly the same as ushin, sashiko stitching, but it's similar in that the cloth is gathered onto a long needle and then pulled out flat after the stitching is done. And then they don't pull. I'm going to do kantha now, apparently. I should keep my powder dry, as they say, and not say everything I've got to say about kantha. But anyway, so there's that kind of kantha. And then there's the more decorative embroidery type of kantha. So I've definitely got more to say about kantha. It will be a future week. I'm not sure which one. And we'll look at both kinds. This video is turning into an advert for future videos. I've talked about the coming Wonky Wednesday, I've talked about the t-shirt string, and now I'm talking about kantha. This bit of blue might just do me one more line. It's nice to just stitch something. This kind of mending as well, apart from being a useful and sustainable thing to do, is very good if you're one of those people who really gets anxious about outcome. And I know I've talked about this a lot before, that Slowstitch is not about being deliberately messy. It's about being focused on the process and aware of your feelings and so on and so forth. And that if you're someone who gets anxious and upset if the outcome isn't satisfactory, then it's fine to focus on the outcome in that respect, whilst paying attention to how you're feeling and trying to find ways to overcome things that make you feel anxious, so that you can enjoy the process. But doing this kind of stitching, if you've got an old tea towel or a duster or just something in the rag bag that requires attention, or that I've gone down the wrong line now. I'll just end this thread because there's hardly any left anyway. That requires mending or can be made into a Zokin, the theme of the week, in case you'd forgotten. Maybe the theme of the week is domestic cloths, and not only Zokin. Then mending that or stitching on that is maybe a good way to liberate yourself, because if you're stitching on something that's literally going to be used to clean the floor, or not used to clean the floor in some of our cases, well, they say it's the thought that counts. The intentions were good. I made a cloth to clean the floor. But anyway, if you're going to stitch on something so mundane as that, then maybe that is a good way to really free yourself up from that focusing on the outcome thing. Because you're literally making a floor cloth, a rag, that's going to be, used to clean up little paddy paw prints, or grandchildren's muddy welly boots prints or whatever it is that makes your floor dirty. If you are someone who gets down on your hands and knees to clean the floor and doesn't use a mop. I do quite like to, well no, that's not true. I was going to misspeak. No, I don't like to clean the floor on my hands and knees. I don't like to clean the floor at all if I can possibly get away from it. But if there's a bit of floor that's, you know, especially grubby, like we've got a little bit of tiled floor just inside the back door, where Stella and Fred both come in and out with muddy paws directly from the garden if it's raining. I do quite like to clean that by hand, you know, just for the satisfaction of seeing it go from mud to clean. A mop doesn't, you know, you're too removed from it with the mop. My knees don't like it anymore, or very much these days. But it's quite satisfying when something gets that dirty. You know, I mean, when it's been muddy, when it's been raining and it's muddy, that can be done every day. I say it can be done. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it is at all. Sometimes I turn a blind eye, pretend I haven't seen it, or think, well, I'll wait till it stops raining because what's the point? But anyway, so I've gone that way. So now I'm going to come through to the other side. I'm just going to come through with my needle to the other side. I'm going to work my way behind the patch there to get myself where I want to be, which is up there somewhere. And now I'm going to stitch across the other way over this bit of chambray. With this dark green. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. I can feel the paracetamol wearing off. Took a couple of paracetamol before I started. Excuse me. And there I've got the line of blue you probably can't see from the under patch, so I'm not going to stitch over the top of that again. I'm going to move across another line, but you know, this is really utilitarian, but at the same time doesn't mean you can't pay a bit of attention, just don't stress about it. And it does feel thicker than the surrounding cloth, of course it does. I mean, this tea towel is quite sturdy because it's linen. But I know that once it's washed, it will, once it's certainly been used and washed a few times, it will kind of soften up. And maybe this wouldn't any longer be a fine linen tea towel for drying your cut glass crystal. Oh no, there is a bit of cut glass crystal in this house, but it never gets used. I think we've got a set of 6 wine glasses and a decanter. But anyway, it's maybe not for drying dishes anymore, but it's certainly good for drying hands. And I don't mean I don't mean hands, I mean hands. He can dry his own hands. So, you know, it's about extending its life, and I thought about that when I was watching Atsushi. Ah, I've got it back to Zokin. Yes. When he talked about cleaning cloths being, you know, there being this kind of hierarchy of cleaning cloths, from cleaning the cleanest thing down to cleaning the dirtiest thing. Reminds me of my dad, who grew up. He's got, or had, 3 brothers and a sister, and they were quite poor. And my grandmother and grandfather brought them up in a little 2-bedroom terraced house in the north of England. So all the boys shared a bedroom, and my Auntie Carol, the youngest, slept in with my grandparents. And I don't think they certainly didn't have an indoor bathroom in the beginning. It would have been the tin bath in front of the fire, you know, with the water heated in the copper boiler. But the rule was always that the cleanest went in first and the dirtiest last. You know, the cleanest child went in first and the dirtiest last. So I would imagine my Auntie Carol being the baby and a girl. Of course, we know girls are cleaner than boys naturally. Would go in first, and then they'd work their way through the brothers. In order of dirtiness. I imagine them all being lined up in the kitchen and being inspected by my grandma Val to see who was cleanest and who was dirtiest. But I thought of that when I was listening to Atsushi talk about the cleaning cloths being, you know, ranked in order of what they were ready to clean, and the lowest thing obviously being the floor. I think I'm not going to be able to get to the end of this bit of green, and I've got another bit there. I could always change colour. Doesn't matter if I'm still in shot. If you're even watching me, I'm only stitching, running stitch up and down. You all know how to do that. I'll just end that off because I'm not going to get to the end anyway, and it's a tiny bit. See, even ending off, it doesn't matter. Just make a back stitch, cut the tail off and call it done. Right, I've got a teeny tiny bit left, maybe 2 lines of stitching. There's something, see, I've had the aught, so this would be the time to just get the smallest bit there was, but they're downstairs. Let's use this bit of brown cotton pearl. Now I've got, oh no, hang on. Oh, hang on a minute. There's a needle in the pincushion with some stuff in. How much is on there? Quite a lot. Is that shorter? To use up these tiny bits, that's shorter. Let's use this bit of yellow. I think I can just about squeeze 2 lines in there. I might do 3 lines because that gap is quite big. See, I do still think about things like the gap between the stitching, not only from a functional point of view. I mean, the stitching's close enough apart, close enough together to be functional. But when I'm doing my collage pieces, if I'm doing this parallel running stitch thing, if there's a gap that's come out a bit big, just because it has, I just go back in and put another line in between. I just visually prefer the look of a sudden smaller gaps than a big gap. Just to me it looks more intentional and more aesthetically pleasing. But that's just me, and it's just being aware of things like that. It doesn't bother me that I know I'm making big stitches on the back. Look, you see there I went big jumper, big jumpy stitch. Doesn't bother me at all, but a big gap between 2 lines of stitching does bother me. I'd rather put another line of stitching in. I made a super big stitch there, which also bothers me a bit. But I'm going to do something about it, not pull it out, of course. Oh, no. When I get to it, I've got just enough thread. I'm going to do another big stitch going the other way and turn it into a cross. And that, my friends, is that. Done. Well, you know, there's many more holes in this detail, but that hole's done. So, well, that's that side of it. And that's that side of it. And if, like I said, it hadn't been a Stella hole, it had been a wear hole, I would have covered the hole plus a bit, and then the stitching I would have extended into the worn area until I hit sound cloth. So it's like darning a sock. If you've watched the sock darning video, you do the weavy thing over the hole, so the piece of cloth simulates that, and then you do running stitches out into the worn cloth to give that a bit more structure. And you're only delaying, it's never going to last forever. Then you might have to patch it again, you might have to patch the patch, and so on. And once you do start patching things like this, especially clothes, you put such a time commitment into it that you end up with wearing, I mean, I had jeans that were just one big patch, and then they went in a quite a difficult place to mend, let's call it that, although I did try, but then they went again when I was out, and luckily I was wearing a jumper that I could tie around my waist, so now you know where I'm talking about. And then I've turned them into something else, you know, I've used the bits for other things. So you're only delaying the inevitable, but it's still, you know, I like to do it. And so that's why I like the idea of the little fukin, the Zokin. The fukin is the cleaning cloth for the kitchen surfaces and washing dishes. The Zokin is the last chance saloon for the rag. You know, its last useful purpose is cleaning the floor. So let's put him in my... I don't know why him. Let's put her. No, him. Let's say him. It's floor cleaning. It should be a man's job. Let's put that in the journal, and I'll tell you my word of the week. Thank you so much, by the way, for all your lovely comments on the journal flip-throughs that I did last week. Well, you know, not just showing you the leaves. I've done a couple of journal flip-throughs for my Ko-fi supporters. The very round one that I showed with the indentation in the spine is on Ko-fi. I will do a flip through of one of the others here on YouTube for all of you one day soon. So thank you so much all for your comments. But I was also very gratified to read that some of you who'd been worrying about your journal for this project getting fat, when you saw my round journals, a few people I've seen saying, oh, I was going to make a volume 2 or a volume 3 because I was worried it was getting fat, but now I've seen yours, I'm just going to carry on and go with it. So that was lovely to read as well. Right, so where are we? Crazy. That's the bundle book. That was my leaf. And now to the middle of this signature. Do we have a preferred way up? I think I prefer this side because it's got the most wear in it. Stitch it with the... There's that bit that was too short. No, not that bit. That bit will do. I double it up. Find a needle. Oh, come on, Catherine. I told you that not the ibuprofen, it was paracetamol I took. It was wearing off. Well, I made a pan of soup 3 days ago. Vegetable minestrone soup. You know, a really hearty one, full of goodness. And we've had it 2 days, and we're having it again today. Hans is not a cook. So there's enough left for today. So I shall go and have my soup and watch the tennis and finish working on my Wonky Wednesday. Right, I'm going to, it's almost a pocket shape because it's wider at the bottom than the top. A lady observed that a horseshoe shaped box in my DMC box was pocket shaped. I'm just going to echo that line of stitching with another line I could also have turned them into crosses, but you know, by stitching the other way. Oops, I'm not using a giant paper clip, am I? Never mind, I'll manage. I fear that a giant paper clip might do more harm than good to the cloth. Whoopsie, whoopsie. Come on, behave yourself, help me out. I was also very gratified to hear how many of you are enjoying stitching on paper. And I get asked a lot about what I'm doing now and why I'm doing this and why I made the journal before. Wouldn't it have been easier to not put the signatures in yet? Well, yes and no. Of course, I could have left it completely loose and bound it when I'd done, and then I wouldn't now be struggling like I am now up against the spine. I'm going to turn it. The thing is, I like to have the finished book to work in, and I know it's going to be this difficult. Well, it gets worse in some of them. You know, some of them that aren't just straightforward pages all the same size get really difficult to stitch into. But for me, that is worth suffering to work into a finished book. But that's me. That doesn't mean that that's the right way or the only way or anything like that. If you find it super annoying to have to do this, don't bind your signatures until you're done. But then just be aware that you'll then have, it'll be slightly more tricky binding your signatures in because they'll be full of stuff rather than, you know, just empty paper. So it's not really swings and roundabouts. Probably putting signatures in with stuff in is easier than doing this. I don't know. Depends on what you find easy. Let's just get, look, for example, while we're on the subject, let's find the end of a signature. So you'd have this as a signature. That's one signature. And the middle of it is, where's the middle of it? Other way. Is that the middle? No, can't find the middle. There's the middle. So the middle of it's there. So you'd be binding that to your cover. You could, of course, then, if things like that bothered you, spread them out accordingly, because some signatures might be thicker than others. So you could, rather than I just spread, you know, I put them in an equal distance apart. But that's, you know, I like to have a finished book to work into, and if I really want to do something complex and I really, really can't sew it in, then I'll glue it in. But I just like to have the finished book. That is a simple answer. So, you know, I appreciate you all saying that, those of you who said, oh, wouldn't it have been easier? Yeah, I would, and I know it would. But I just like the finish. I just like to work into a book. Right, anyway, so I said I had a word of the week. First of all, let's date it. We're the 8th. 8th of the 7th. 2024, and K3N, and I'm going to write under my little Zokin. Well, first I'm going to write the Zokin. Oh, I didn't tell you what it actually means. Zo means miscellaneous. Can I spell miscellaneous? Miscellaneous. And kin means cloth. I think that's right. So it's a miscellaneous cloth. It's a cloth for cleaning, you know, uncategorized things, basically floors. And I'm going to write as well, honouring. I'm putting a U in it because I'm English, but feel free to leave the U out. My American friends, honouring domestic cloths. And then my word is this one, which I just read recently somewhere and looked it up. Rispair. So it's like despair, but with an R, and it means the return of hope. Is this coming out underneath? It is now. Never mind. After a period of despair. And I love that concept. It was revitalised after the pandemic by a woman called Susie Dent, who those of you in the UK who watch Countdown, is it Countdown? Well, no, she's in Dictionary Corner. She's a word person. So, and it was coined in the 14th century, I believe, by a Scottish gentleman, and then it fell out of use, although we all talk about despair far more than we, should and should like to. But it fell out of use, and it's such a shame, because return of hope after a period of despair is, quite important. But what I also like about it is, I know it's not spelt correctly, but it's got in it as well, for me, a sense of repair. So despair, hope, repair. I feel that all those three concepts are in that word. So that's my word of the week, rispair. And Zokin and honouring domestic cloths, because we're all domestic goddesses, aren't we? Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that rather strange weekly video. I'm off to have some of my warmed up soup and watch the tennis. And thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.